Good evening and welcome to In Focus, your guide to the key stories shaping our world. And here's what we're covering tonight. Saudi Arabia's expanded ministerial meeting in Riyadh, which will address Syria's future with discussions on lifting sanctions, increasing aid, and ensuring stability. Meanwhile, in Gaza, violence escalates as diplomatic efforts face mounting challenges. From US-Israeli talks to covert negotiations with Hamas, the quest for peace remains urgent. Stay with us and we'll have some expert analysis for you next. Saudi Arabia is hosting an expanded ministerial meeting in Riyadh, involving senior representatives of Western and regional countries to deliberate on Syria's future. Significant topics include lifting sanctions, increasing humanitarian aid, and fostering stability. So Riyadh hosted a significant regional meeting where foreign ministers and top diplomats from Western and Middle Eastern countries engaged with Syria's new foreign minister, Assad Hassan al-Shibani. This marks the first such gathering since the removal of the previous regime, signaling a shift in Syria's diplomatic landscape. Reuters has reported that German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock and British Foreign Minister David Lammy joined the talks alongside Arab ministers from Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, and others, with EU and US envoys also participating. The meeting highlights renewed international efforts to address Syria's evolving political situation, emphasizing collaboration between regional and global powers to support stability and reconstruction. To provide some analysis for us on these recent developments concerning the expanded ministerial meeting in Riyadh, joining us from Cairo is Mr. Ashraf Al-Ashri. Thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Al-Ashri is the editorial director of Al-Ahram newspaper. So what do you think Damascus is hoping to get out of this summit?
Good evening to you and to the viewers. The meeting is following an Aqaba meeting, the second. Joined in Riyadh meeting 18 foreign ministers, a number of international and regional institutions, top of which the LAS and the EU. The agenda tackled one issue, the situation in Syria, and how would the international community to assist and the deterioration of the situation following the Al-Assad fall. They agreed on several issues through 3 sessions on the level of all the foreign ministers. Tackled a set of resolution that would ease the transitional period in Syria, on top of which the sanction file in such a delicate time, as stated by the Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia, Faisal bin Farhan. And I think for the first time since the topple of Al-Assad is to form the new administration and to revitalize the stability in the region and assigned this administration to impose an integrated, comprehensive political process to participate all the Syrian factions and the effective powers in order to have a beginning of the participation of all the political powers in the future of Syria. And I think there is a consensus of all the giant countries participated in Riyadh to have an effective political settlement through a gathering Syrian conference, including the opposition and all party factions. And through this conference to come out with forming a transitional government, an issue, and forming a political a committee to reformulate the constitutions, and I think that all tackled the resolution 2245 to the necessity to settle the political life by the United Nations and to generate a new political term to tackle all the tackled issues. And Egypt's stance was very clear, asserted by Mr. Foreign Minister of Dr. Badr Abdelati to his counterpart, that they were all with the political settlement and strengthening, and not to leave Syria and a platform of terrorism, and the Cairo's assistance in the political process in Syria that gains all the satisfaction of the Syrian conflict, and to confront terrorism and to make Syria as a place for having the terrorists. And some of the countries offered to provide assistance financially, as Germany provided 50 or 60 million euros. Following the international community, that the positive steps being taken through the political settlement process by the participation of all the effective factors in Syria.
Now, one of the things that Syria will be looking for is a lifting of the sanctions. What do you think are the primary challenges to lifting those sanctions on Syria?
In fact, there are a set of internal challenges from the first place by controlling the security in Syria and launching a political process. And the new administration should be biased by the Syrian people of forming a transitional government to include all the parties. The government formed by Mohammed al-Bashir has already generated more concerns of the national political forces, even the opposition abroad, that this government of one spectrum do not represent all the spectrums of Syria. This was strengthened in the Al-Aqaba meeting and today's meeting in Riyadh, and to open the public way to participate through a multiple comprehensive process without any exclusion of all the Syrian parties. And I think the Syrian government, if they succeeded to implement a resolution to lay out a roadmap of the upcoming period, and I think if this would happen, would send in a positive message for the international community that Syria is going on the right track, and hence all the United Nations, the regional and international power would cooperate to potential of lifting sanctions. And I think the ball now in the Syrian field of the Al-Shara to go in line with the UN resolution and to fulfill the aspiration of the Syrian people, and to play a great role of forming a technocrat or independent and transitional government that not to form an army based on a religious reference as happening now, that increased the concern of the European and the American, sending warns to the Syrian administration to reject including some religious or tourist elements into the national Syrian army. And if Al-Shara have succeeded in that matter, and I think this will in return receive positive steps, and any delay would make these sanctions to be extended, particularly that there are modern types of the sanction internationally, in addition to the Caesar act that hinder the U.S. support of the Syrian state and imposing sanctions to some individuals and Syrian corporations for the Sharia to go in the direct of getting an acceptance to address the demands of the international community and to create a way of political process to fulfill all the demands of the political settlements by the inclusion of all the parties in Syria.
Now, you mentioned Egypt a little while ago, and of course Badr Abdel Ati, the foreign minister, is there. What role would you think that Egypt might play in supporting Syria's peaceful political transition?
Determinants of the different positions are clear, stipulated by the President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi as well as the Foreign Minister in several meetings, lately in Al-Aqaba meeting and today in Riyadh's meeting. There was a deliberation proposed by the Minister of Egypt, the Foreign Minister of Egypt, to have an orientation to by the new Syrian administration through comprehensive political process, by the pure Syrian participation by the Syrians themselves, and at a round table to gather all the political parties to tackle the future of Syria that should be inclusive and to help in drawing the future of Syria and to spare Syria to be a safe haven of the terrorist group and to have a response of 2254 issued in 2015 regarding the peaceful settlement. And Egypt played a great role in paving the way and supporting the Syrian people as it pursued for the Syrian people to gain more wins, along with the international consensus with the administration of Syria to tackle all the issue lately and to remove all the concern of the control in one religion's factions on the matter of the country. If this would happen, Egypt is ready to cooperate with regionally and internationally in supporting the Syrian people. Cairo lately have already sent food and aid shipments of 15 tons of urgent assistance, and Cairo will do the same and repeat it, but provided to have a green light in the tunnel for the new administration to fulfill the aspiration of their people, open positive channels and make Syria free and independent away of the intervention of the terrorist groups in order to make Syria more positive and strong as an added factor of the Arab League to maintain the sovereignty of Syria and the national security for the region, and not to make Syria a source of threat for the state to be a safe haven of terrorists that is totally rejected by Cairo through Riyadh's meeting.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to have to interrupt you there, but thank you very much, Mr. Ashraf Al-Ashri, the editorial director of Al-Ahram newspaper. Thank you very much for joining us here. Now, the situation in Gaza remains dire, with ongoing violence and critical diplomatic efforts underway. From high-level meetings involving the Trump administration's Middle East envoy to covert negotiations by Israeli intelligence officials, the international community is grappling with finding a path to peace. Despite these efforts, the humanitarian toll continues to mount, with over 46,000 deaths reported in Gaza. As Axios News reports, President-elect Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, met with Netanyahu to push for a Gaza ceasefire and detainee deal before January 20th, when Trump takes office. The headline, Trump envoy presses for Gaza ceasefire deal before Jan 20, underscores the urgency of these talks, with Trump warning of hell to pay if hostages remain captive. Netanyahu has sent top intelligence officials to Doha, signaling the critical nature of these negotiations. Now, to discuss this with us is Dr. Mohammed Osman, who is an international relations specialist. Let's start with this meeting then, with the Trump envoy, Steve Witkoff. What do you make of this meeting with Netanyahu? And how realistic is it really that a ceasefire might be achieved before Trump's inauguration on January 20th?
Thank you for having me, Mark. Well, now it seems that in the negotiating process for reaching a ceasefire or some sort of settlement in Gaza, now we have a new variable, and that variable is basically the incoming Trump administration. It seems that Donald Trump is now way more willing than before to play a certain role in reaching some sort of settlement in the Gaza Strip, and that's the reason Trump wants to come into office with less wars and conflicts to deal with, and he sees that the Trump administration, that the ongoing Gaza conflict is solvable if he can secure some sort of prisoner exchange, if you may, between the Israeli occupation authorities and Hamas. And that explains for the hot rhetoric he adopts all the time, and all of these fiery threats he lambasts the Palestinians with every now and then. So that seems to be, but however, I remain cautiously optimistic about this. Maybe the Trump variable with the sending of Steve Witkoff to Doha in order to take part in the indirect negotiation process in the presence of the head of Mossad. Maybe this could secure a breakthrough. However, this is something that is possible. However, it remains unlikely in my opinion.
And Israel, you mentioned there, has sent the Mossad chief to Qatar for indirect negotiations with Hamas. What does that say about Israel's approach to resolving the situation?
Well, it says that Israel is, that's not the first time the Israelis have sent the head of Mossad to Qatar, and they have sent senior officials before to take part in the negotiations between Hamas and the indirect negotiations, of course, between Hamas and Israel in order to reach a deal. However, that is hardly an indicator, in my opinion, that we are about to reach a breakthrough, because this happened before. The senior Israeli intelligence officials always arrive in Doha and take part in these meetings, and eventually they collapse and they do not reach an agreement. It transpires afterwards.
So what should Dr.
Go
Osman?
Go ahead.
What should we be looking out for? What would be a good sign coming out of Qatar, of these meetings? What should we to look forward to for some hope?
Of course, there are a plethora of leaks, and we cannot believe any of them without any more evidence to support their credibility. If there is talk of a permanent ceasefire and a conclusive end to this war as part of any settlement, maybe then there can be hope. However, any talk of temporary arrangements and temporary truce and a limited exchange of detainees and so on and so forth, I think we will just be running in circles, and we will not go anywhere. And it seems that the Israelis still do not have any genuine will to end this war. They want this war to drag on until Trump comes to power. And when Trump assumes office, they are counting on more U.S. support in order for them to create new realities on the ground in Gaza that go way beyond the release of the detainees. Actually, the Israelis have an expansionist agenda. They seek to reduce the territory of the Gaza Strip. They seek to displace and ethnically cleanse northern Gaza. So it doesn't seem that this entire war, from the perspective of Israel, is only about the detainees. That just isn't true.
Of course, in Trump's last term, he enabled Netanyahu to increase the number of settlements, and there's indications that he might do the same again. And he's taking a very firm stance against Hamas and giving out warnings about the detainees' return. What is the Trump effect on these talks?
I think with this kind of irresponsible rhetoric on the part of President-elect Donald Trump, it only serves to embolden Israeli aggression and impunity, basically. And the Israelis are already taking advantage of these very harsh statements in order to resume further escalation inside Gaza. And let's not forget that the first time Trump made these statements as a president-elect was after a dinner he had with Mrs. Netanyahu. So it seems that he is very easily influenced in this regard. And I think what the Israelis are counting on is less U.S. pressure in order to allow of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. The Trump administration will not regard as the Biden administration did. So the starvation policies and the deprivation of basic necessities of the Palestinian people as a means of warfare, concessions from Hamas will be increased and expanded under a Netanyahu government supported by a Trump administration, basically.
Is there anything, do you think, that regional players like Egypt or maybe even international organizations can do to try and bridge the gaps between the parties?
Egypt is already a pivotal role and an indispensable role and instrumental as well in the negotiating process. Egypt is the cornerstone of the entire mediation process, supported by Qatar and the United States. And it seems that Egypt is exerting all the efforts it can from a noble standpoint that takes the Palestinian cause and its essentials into account in any mediation process, and of course the humanitarian perspective as well. However, Egypt is doing all it could, and at the end of the day, the Israelis are not willing to budge. The only force that will be able to exact any actual pressure on Israel to deter them, to restrain them, is the United States of America. This did not happen under the Trump administration, the Biden administration, excuse me, and most likely it will not happen under the Trump administration. As for international organizations like the United Nations and the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court and others, we have seen how ineffective they are before the U.S. veto, before the U.S. enablement of Israeli impunity. Unfortunately, this is the world we live in, and the Gaza war only further exposed the lack of credibility and effectiveness of these international organizations, unfortunately.
We mentioned the humanitarian situation in Gaza and what seems like a deliberate attempt to starve the people and commit genocide by the Israelis on the Palestinian people of Gaza. Is there anything the international community? Is there anything that Trump could do? Would you see him doing in order to make the Israelis put humanitarian aid into Gaza? Or do you think it's not going to be a priority of his?
I don't think it will be a priority. I think his priority is ending the war. However, ending the war on terms favorable to Israel. So as long as these terms do not exist, he will let the Israelis unleash their power and their force and their aggression in order to create these favorable conditions. I do not see Trump playing any vital role in this regard. I hope I'm mistaken. However, this is what I believe from the given variables at the moment.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Dr. Mohammed Osman. Always valuable insights. Thank you very much for being here with us on Q News. As Gaza continues to face immense challenges, it's clear that diplomatic efforts must intensify to bring relief to its people. And that's all for this episode of In Focus today. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News. Good night.